Okay, tonight is the 21st of August and is also the 33rd talk in the series of this Majjhima Nikaya. Now we come to Sutta number 79, Culasakuludayi Sutta, the shorter discourse to Sakuludayi. The sutta is a bit humorous. Thus have I heard. On one occasion, the Blessed One was living at Rajagaha in the bamboo grove, the squirrel sanctuary. Now on that occasion, the wanderer Sakuludayi was staying in the peacock sanctuary, the wanderer's park, with a large assembly of wanderers. Then when it was morning, the Blessed One dressed, and taking his bowl and outer robe, went to Rajagaha for alms. Then he thought, it is still too early to wander for alms in Rajagaha. Suppose I went to the wanderer Sakuludayi in the peacock sanctuary, the wanderer's park. Then the Blessed One went to the peacock sanctuary, the wanderer's park. Now on that occasion, the wanderer Sakuludayi was seated with a large assembly of wanderers who were making an uproar. As before, they're talking all kinds of talk. And the Buddha came and then they quieted down. For what discussion are you sitting together here now, Udayin? And what was your discussion that was interrupted? Noble Sir, let be the discussion for which we are now sitting together here. The Blessed One can well hear about it later. Noble Sir, when I do not come to this assembly, and it sits talking many kinds of pointless talk. But when I have come to this assembly, then it sits looking up to me, thinking, let us hear the Dhamma that the recluse Udayin expounds. However, when the Blessed One comes, then both I and this assembly sit looking up to the Blessed One, thinking, let us hear the Dhamma that the Blessed One expounds. I'll stop here for a moment. So this Udayin is telling a lie here. Says, when he's with the assembly, they all keep quiet and wait to hear his Dhamma. He didn't know that the Buddha can read his mind. Then Udayin suggests something that I should speak about. Noble Sir, in recent days there has been one claiming to be omniscient and all-seeing, to have complete knowledge and vision thus. Whether I am walking or standing or sleeping or awake, knowledge and vision are continuously and uninterruptedly present to me. When I asked him a question about the past, he prevaricated, laid the talk aside and showed anger, hate and bitterness. Then I remembered the Blessed One thus. Surely it is the Blessed One. Surely it is the Sublime One who is skilled in these things. But Udayin, who was it that claimed to be omniscient and all-seeing? Yet when asked a question by you about the past, prevaricated, led the talk aside and showed anger, hate and bitterness. It was Niganta Nataputta, Venerable Sir. Stop here for a moment. During the Buddha's days, there were 6 famous external ascetic teachers, and some of them, like this Niganta Nataputta, they claim to be all-knowing, omniscient, all-seeing, etc. But when you ask, like when this Sakuludayi asked him some questions he could not answer, then he prevaricated and showed anger. Udayin, if someone should recollect his manifold past lives, that is, 1 birth, 2 births, etc., thus with his aspects and particulars, should he recollect his manifold past lives, then either he might ask me a question about the past, or I might ask him a question about the past, and he might satisfy my mind with his answer to my question, or I might satisfy his mind with my answer to his question. If someone had the divine eye, which is purified and surpasses the human, should see beings passing away and reappearing, inferior and superior, fair and ugly, fortunate and unfortunate, etc., and understand how beings pass on according to their actions, then either he might ask me a question about the future, or I might ask him a question about the future, and he might satisfy my mind with his answer to my question, or I might satisfy his mind with my answer to his question. But let be the past, Udayin, let be the future. I shall teach you the Dhamma. When this exists, that comes to be. With the arising of this, that arises. When this does not exist, that does not come to be. With the cessation of this, that ceases. And Udayan said, Venerable Sir, I cannot even recollect with their aspects and particulars all that I have experienced within this present existence. So how should I recollect my manifold past lives? That is, one birth, two births, etc., with the aspects and particulars, as the Blessed One does. And I cannot now even see a mud goblin. So how should I, with the divine eye, which is purified and surpasses the human, see beings passing away and reappearing, inferior and superior, fair and ugly, fortunate and unfortunate, etc., and understand how beings pass on according to their actions, as the Blessed One does? But Venerable Sir, let the Blessed One, when the Blessed One told me, let be the past, Udayan, let be the future, I shall teach you the Dhamma. When this exists, that comes to be. With the arising of this, that arises. When this does not exist, that does not come to be. With the cessation of this, that ceases. That is even more unclear to me. Perhaps, Venerable Sir, I might satisfy the Blessed One's mind by answering a question about our own teacher's doctrine. Stop here for a moment. So here, the Buddha, since this Udayan, he said, he asked this Niganta Nataputta a question about the past, and Niganta Nataputta could not answer and showed anger. So the Buddha said, if someone wants to discuss the past with me, he should be able to recollect his past lives, like the Buddha is able to, then they can discuss about the past. Or if somebody wants to discuss about the future, he should be able to have the divine eye or heavenly eye and see into the future. But if not, then you cannot really discuss about the past and the future. But the Buddha said, forget about that. Let's talk about this dependent origination. Then this Udayan said, he cannot recollect his past, even this present life also he cannot recollect well. And as for the divine eye, he said he cannot even see a mud goblin spirit in the mud. How can he see with the heavenly eye? And then he says, when the Buddha talks about dependent origination, and this exists, that comes to be, the arising of this, that arises, etc., he said that's even more unclear to him. So he said, maybe he can ask the Buddha about his own teacher's doctrine. Well, Udayan, what is taught in your own teacher's doctrine? Venerable Sir, it is taught that in our own teacher's doctrine, this is the perfect splendor, this is the perfect splendor. But Udayan, since it is taught in your teacher's doctrine, this is the perfect splendor, this is the perfect splendor, what is that perfect splendor? Venerable Sir, that splendor is the perfect splendor which is unsurpassed by any other splendor, higher and more sublime. But Udayan, what is that splendor which is unsurpassed by any other splendor, higher and more sublime? Venerable Sir, that splendor is the perfect splendor which is unsurpassed by any other splendor, higher or more sublime. And the Buddha said, Udayan, you might continue for a long time in this way. You say, Venerable Sir, that splendor is the perfect splendor which is unsurpassed by any other splendor, higher or more sublime. Yet you do not indicate what that splendor is. Suppose a man were to say, I am in love with the most beautiful girl in this country. Then they would ask him, good man, that most beautiful girl in this country with whom you are in love, do you know whether she is from the noble class, or from the Brahmin class, or from the merchant class, or from the worker class? And he would reply, no. Then they would ask him, good man, that most beautiful girl in this country with whom you are in love, do you know her name and clan, whether she is tall or short or of middle height, whether she is dark or brown or golden skin, what village or town or city she lives in? And he would reply no to each of the questions. And then they would ask him, good man, do you then love a girl you have never known or seen? And he would reply, yes. What do you think, Udayan? That being so, would not that man's talk amount to nonsense? Surely, Venerable Sir, that being so, that man's talk would amount to nonsense. But in the same way, Udayan, you say thus, that splendor is the perfect splendor which is unsurpassed by any other splendor, higher or more sublime. Yet you do not indicate what that splendor is. Venerable Sir, just as a beautiful beryl gem of purest water, eight-faceted, well cut, lying on red brocade, glows, radiates and shines, of such splendor is the self, surviving unimpaired after death. I'll stop here for a moment. So here he's talking about the perfect splendor, but he cannot really tell the Buddha what is that perfect splendor. And the Buddha said they are talking nonsense, just like this man who says he's in love with the most beautiful girl, but cannot describe that girl. So he had no choice. He was cornered. He had to come up with an answer. So he gave this simile of the beautiful beryl gem. This beryl gem is a transparent precious stone, and it's lying on red brocade, a red piece of cloth. So in the daylight, it will seem to glow and radiate and shine. And this, he is talking about the self surviving unimpaired after death. I mean, the soul, in their teaching, the soul is the perfect splendor. What do you think, Udayan? This beautiful beryl gem of purest water, eight-faceted, well cut, lying on a red brocade, which glows, radiates and shines, or a glowworm in the thick darkness of the night. Of these two, which gives off the splendor which is more excellent and sublime? And he thought for a while and he said, the glowworm in the thick darkness of the night. Venerable Sir, stop here for a moment. So this beautiful beryl gem that he described, that glows and radiates and shines, that is only so in the bright daylight. But in the thick darkness of the night, you cannot even see it. So how can it shine or radiate? But in the thick darkness of the night, the glowworm that moves slowly, it glows. So at least the glowworm you can see. So the glowworm is brighter than this beryl gem. What do you think, Udayan? This glowworm in the thick darkness of the night, or an oil lamp in the thick darkness of the night, of these two, which gives off the splendor that is more excellent and sublime? The oil lamp, Venerable Sir. What do you think, Udayan? This oil lamp in the thick darkness of the night, or the great bonfire in the thick darkness of the night, of these two, which gives off the splendor that is more excellent and sublime? The great bonfire, Venerable Sir. What do you think, Udayan? This great bonfire in the thick darkness of the night, or the morning star towards dawn in a clear cloudless sky, of these two, which gives off the splendor that is more excellent and sublime? The morning star towards dawn in a clear cloudless sky, Venerable Sir. What do you think, Udayan? The morning star towards dawn in a clear cloudless sky, or the full moon at midnight in a clear cloudless sky on the Uposatha day of the 15th, of these two, which gives off the splendor that is more excellent and sublime? The full moon at midnight in a clear cloudless sky on the Uposatha day of the 15th, Venerable Sir. What do you think, Udayan? The full moon at midnight in a clear cloudless sky on the Uposatha day of the 15th, or the full disk of the sun at midday in a clear cloudless sky in autumn in the last month of the rainy season, of these two, which gives off the splendor that is more excellent and sublime? The full disk of the sun at midday in a clear cloudless sky in autumn in the last month of the rainy season, Venerable Sir. Beyond this, Udayan, I know of very many gods whose splendor the radiance of the sun and moon does not match. Yet I do not say that there is no other splendor higher or more sublime than that splendor. But you, Udayan, say of the splendor which is lower and meaner than a glowworm's, this is the perfect splendor. Yet you do not indicate what that splendor is. The Blessed One has terminated the discussion. The Sublime One has terminated the discussion. But Udayan, why do you say that? Remember, sir, it is taught in our own teacher's doctrine, this is the perfect splendor, this is the perfect splendor. But on being pressed and questioned and cross-questioned about our own teacher's doctrine by the Blessed One, we are found empty, hollow and mistaken. So the Buddha shows him how silly his perfect splendor is. Cannot even compare to the glowworm. How is it, Udayan? Is there an entirely pleasant world? Is there a practical way to realize an entirely pleasant world? Honorable Sir, it is taught in our own teacher's doctrine. There is an entirely pleasant world. There is a practical way to realize an entirely pleasant world. But Udayan, what is that practical way to realize an entirely pleasant world? Here, Venerable Sir, abandoning the killing of living beings, someone abstains from killing living beings. Abandoning the taking of what is not given, he abstains from taking what is not given. Abandoning misconduct in sensual pleasures, he abstains from misconduct in sensual pleasures. Abandoning false speech, he abstains from false speech. Or else he undertakes and practices some kind of asceticism. This is the practical way to realize an entirely pleasant world. What do you think, Udayan? On an occasion when he abandons the killing of living beings and abstains from killing living beings, does his self then feel only pleasure or both pleasure and pain? Both pleasure and pain, Venerable Sir. What do you think, Udayan? On an occasion when he abandons the taking of what is not given and abstains from taking what is not given, when he abandons misconduct in sensual pleasures and abstains from misconduct in sensual pleasures, when he abandons false speech and abstains from false speech, does his self then feel only pleasure or both pleasure and pain? Both pleasure and pain, Venerable Sir. What do you think, Udayan? On an occasion when he undertakes and practices some kind of asceticism, does his self then feel only pleasure or both pleasure and pain? Both pleasure and pain, Venerable Sir. What do you think, Udayan? Does the realization of an entirely pleasant world come about by falling away of mixed pleasure and pain? The Blessed One has terminated the discussion. The Sublime One has terminated the discussion. But Udayan, why do you say that? Venerable Sir, it is taught in our own teacher's doctrine. There is an entirely pleasant world. There is a practical way to realize an entirely pleasant world. But on being pressed and questioned and cross-questioned about our own teacher's doctrine by the Blessed One, we are found empty, hollow and mistaken. Stop here for a moment. So here the Buddha is making him see that when he practices these precepts, this person, he feels both pleasure and pain. Since he is feeling both pleasure and pain here and now, so it is expected that when he passes away, he will feel both pleasure and pain. So this brings to mind, like the people like to chant Amitabha Buddha's name, hoping to be reborn in the pure land, in the high heaven. But right now, you can see from this sutta, if you are chanting Amitabha's name, you are feeling pleasant as well as pain in this present lifetime. So that being so, it is expected when you pass away, you will also experience both pleasure and pain. On the other hand, the Buddha's disciples, they can reach high states of jhana, where they feel only bliss. In that case, then they can be reborn in the world of bliss. But how is it, Venerable Sir? Is there an entirely pleasant world? Is there a practical way to realize an entirely pleasant world? There is an entirely pleasant world, Udayan. There is a practical way to realize an entirely pleasant world. Venerable Sir, what is that practical way to realize an entirely pleasant world? Here, Udayan, quite secluded from sensual pleasures, secluded from unwholesome states, a monk enters upon and abides in the first jhana. With the stilling of applied and sustained thought, he enters upon and abides in the second jhana, in the third jhana. This is the practical way to realize an entirely pleasant world. But sir, that is not the practical way to realize an entirely pleasant world. At that point, an entirely pleasant world has already been realized. Udayan, at that point, an entirely pleasant world has not yet been realized. That is only the practical way to realize an entirely pleasant world. When this was said, the wanderer Sakuludayi's assembly made an uproar, saying very loudly and noisily, "We are lost along with our own teachers' doctrines. We are lost along with our own teachers' doctrines. We know nothing higher than that." Stop here for a moment. So here, Udayan is discussing with the Buddha all this about the Dhamma, and his disciples couldn't understand a word of it. So they are feeling very lost. And they say they know nothing higher than their own teachers' doctrines. Then the wanderer Sakuludayi quieted those wanderers and asked the Blessed One, Venerable Sir, at what point is an entirely pleasant world realized? Here, Udayan, with the abandoning of pleasure and pain, and with the previous disappearance of joy and grief, a monk enters upon and abides in the fourth jhana, which has neither pain nor pleasure, and utter purity of mindfulness and equanimity. He dwells with those deities who have arisen in an entirely pleasant world, and he talks with them and enters into conversation with them. It is at this point that an entirely pleasant world has been realized. I'll stop here for a moment. So here, when a person attains the fourth jhana, the Buddha says, an entirely pleasant world has been realized, not even in the third jhana. According to the commentary of the Majjhima Nikaya, they say, why the Buddha says at this point entirely pleasant world has been realized, they say because when somebody attains the fourth jhana, he goes for rebirth in the third jhana heaven, which is entirely pleasant. But this doesn't seem to have much basis in the suttas. In the suttas, I think in the Anguttara Nikaya, there's one sutta where the Buddha says, when a person attains the fourth jhana, and when he comes out of the fourth jhana, if he sits on a celestial couch. If he walks on a celestial couch. When he stands, he's also like in heaven. When he lies down, he's also like in a celestial couch in heaven. In other words, he's totally in comfort, totally blissed out, even when he just comes out of the fourth jhana. That's why he's as though he's in an entirely pleasant world. Besides that, when a person attains the fourth jhana, the Buddha says the divine eye, a spiritual eye opens, although not for all monks, maybe half of them. And then because of this divine eye, he can see devas and devis and talk with them. So it's as though he's already in heaven. Venerable Sir, surely it is for the sake of realizing that entirely pleasant world that monks lead the holy life under the Blessed One. It is not for the sake of realizing the entirely pleasant world that monks lead the holy life under me. There are other states who die in higher and more sublime than that, and it is for the sake of realizing them that monks lead the holy life under me. What are those higher and more sublime states, Venerable Sir, for the sake of realizing which monks lead the holy life under the Blessed One? Here, Udayin, Tathagata appears in the world, Arahant Sammasambuddha. So here, as in Sutta 51, section 12 to 19, the Buddha describes how a lay person hears the Dhamma, and then he has faith and renounces and practices a spiritual path. Having thus abandoned these 5 hindrances, imperfections of the mind that weaken wisdom, quite secluded from sensual pleasures, secluded from unwholesome states, a monk enters upon and abides in the first jhana. This Udayan is a higher and more sublime state for the sake of realizing which monks lead the holy life under me. Again, with the stilling of applied and sustained thought, a monk enters upon and abides in the second jhana, third jhana, fourth jhana. This too, Udayan, is a higher and more sublime state for the sake of realizing which monks lead the holy life under me. Stop here for a moment. So here, why is it the Buddha describes the first jhana, second jhana, third jhana, fourth jhana? Because earlier he already talked about having attained the fourth jhana. But just now they were talking about entirely pleasant world, that pleasurable state, that pleasant state. The Buddha says it is not for that pleasant state that monks lead the holy life, but for the purpose of attaining these jhanas, because these jhanas lead to wisdom, lead to the abandoning of the hindrances. When his concentrated mind is thus purified, bright, unblemished, rid of imperfection, malleable, wieldy, steady, and attained to imperturbability, he directs it to the knowledge of the recollection of past lives. He recollects his manifold past lives. There is 1 birth, 2 births, 300, thousands, etc. Thus, with the aspects and particulars, he recollects his manifold past lives. This too, Udayan, is a higher and more sublime state for the sake of realizing which monks lead the holy life under me. When his concentrated mind is thus purified, bright, unblemished, rid of imperfection, malleable, wieldy, steady, and attained to imperturbability, he directs it to the knowledge of passing away and reappearance of beings, etc. Thus with the divine eye or heavenly eye, which is purified and surpasses the human, he sees beings passing away and reappearing, inferior and superior, fair and ugly, fortunate and unfortunate. And he understands how beings pass on according to the actions of karma. This too, Udayan, is a higher and more sublime state, for the sake of realizing which monks lead the holy life under me. Stop here for a moment. So you see, you notice here, pay attention here, that actually the purpose of the holy life is to realize the jhanas, as stated very clearly by the Buddha here. Purpose of the holy life is to realize the 4 jhanas, and following that, to attain the higher knowledges, a recollection of past lives, the heavenly eye mentioned here. So some people nowadays, they belittle concentration and belittle the jhanas, and belittle the psychic powers. But that's not what the Buddha says. The Buddha praises the jhanas and praises the psychic powers, saying it is for the sake of this that monks live the holy life under him, to attain the jhanas and to attain the abhinyas, higher knowledges. And also you notice here, before a monk can attain the knowledge of the recollection of past lives, he has to attain the 4th jhana first. After he has attained the 4th jhana, then the concentrated mind becomes purified, bright, unblemished, rid of imperfection, malleable, wieldy, steady, and attain to imperturbability. Only with this state can you get these abhinyas, higher knowledges arise. Knowledge of past lives, etc. When his concentrated mind is thus purified, bright, unblemished, rid of imperfection, malleable, wieldy, steady, and attained to imperturbability, he directs it to the knowledge of the destruction of the taints. He understands as it actually is. This is suffering. This is the origin of suffering. This is the cessation of suffering. This is the path leading to the cessation of suffering. Similarly for the asavas, the taints. When he knows and sees thus, his mind is liberated from the taint of sensual desire, from the taint of being, and from the taint of ignorance. When it is liberated, there comes the knowledge it is liberated. He understands birth is destroyed, the holy life has been lived. What had to be done has been done. There is no more coming to any state of being. This too, Udayan, is a higher and more sublime state, for the sake of realizing which monks lead the holy life under me. These, Udayan, are those higher and more sublime states, for the sake of realizing which monks lead the holy life under me. When this was said, the wondrous Sakuludayi said to the Blessed One, Magnificent Venerable Sir, Magnificent Venerable Sir, the Blessed One has made the Dhamma clear in many ways, as though he were turning upright what had been overthrown, revealing what was hidden, showing the way to one who was lost, or holding up a lamp in the dark for those with eyesight to see forms. I go to the Blessed One for refuge, and to the Dhamma, and to the Sangha of monks. I will receive the going forth under the Blessed One, Venerable Sir. I will receive the full ordination. When this was said, the wondrous Sakuludayi's assembly addressed him thus, Do not lead the holy life under recluse Gotama, Master Udayan. Having been a teacher, Master Udayan, do not live as a pupil. For Master Udayan to do so would be as if a water jug were to become a pitcher. Do not lead the holy life under the recluse Gotama, Master Udayan. Having been a teacher, Master Udayan, do not live as a pupil. That is how the wondrous Sakuludayi's assembly obstructed him from leading the holy life under the Blessed One. That's the end of the sutta. So this last part, you see, these disciples of this Udayan, they couldn't understand a word of what the Buddha was saying, so they could not appreciate the Buddha's Dhamma, and then they were afraid they'll lose their teacher, so they told him, don't go and follow this Samana Gotama, remain as our teacher. So he did not go forth. In this sutta, there are two things about this sutta. One is the comical part. Some of these external ascetics, they are so ignorant. They just keep talking about the splendor, but cannot really describe the splendor. And then the other thing that's more important in this sutta, the Buddha says very clearly, monks lead the holy life under him for a few reasons. For realizing the jhanas, up to the four jhanas, and then for realizing the abhinyas, the higher knowledges that culminate in the destruction of the asavas. That means arahanthood, attaining liberation. Okay, we go to the next sutta, number 80, Vekhanassa Sutta. To Vekhanassa, thus have I heard. On one occasion, the Blessed One was living at Savatthi in Jeta's Grove, Anatta Pindika's spa. Then the wanderer Vekhanassa went with the Blessed One and exchanged greetings with him. When this courteous and amiable talk was finished, he stood at one side, and in the Blessed One's presence he uttered this exclamation, "This is the perfect splendor, this is the perfect splendor." Now we have another guy here with this perfect splendor. But Kachana, why do you say, this is the perfect splendor, this is the perfect splendor? What is that perfect splendor? Master Gotama, that splendor is the perfect splendor which is unsurpassed by any other splendor, higher or more sublime. But Kachana, what is that splendor that is unsurpassed by any other splendor, higher or more sublime? Master Gotama, that splendor is the perfect splendor that is unsurpassed by any other splendor, higher or more sublime. Kachana, you might continue for a long time in this way. So what follows is the same as the previous sutta. The Buddha shows him that he's talking nonsense. Yet you do not indicate what their splendor is. Kachana, there are these 5 chords of sensual pleasure. What 5? Forms cognizable by the eye that are wished for, desired, agreeable and likable, connected with sensual desire and provocative of lust. Sounds cognizable by the ear, odors cognizable by the nose, flavors cognizable by the tongue, tangibles cognizable by the body that are wished for, desired, agreeable and likable, connected with sensual desire and provocative of lust. These are the 5 chords of sensual pleasure. Now Kachana, the pleasure and joy that arise dependent on these 5 chords of sensual pleasure are called sensual pleasure. Thus, sensual pleasure arises through sensual pleasure. But beyond sensual pleasure, there is a pleasure higher than the sensual, and that is declared to be the highest among them. And this was said, the wanderer Vekhanassa said, "It is wonderful, Master Gotama, it is marvelous how well that has been expressed by Master Gotama. Thus, sensual pleasure arises through sensual pleasures, but beyond sensual pleasure, there is a pleasure higher than the sensual, and that is declared to be the highest among them." And the Buddha said, Kachana, for you who are of another view, who accept another teaching, who approve of another teaching, who pursue a different training, who follow a different teacher, it is hard to know what sensuality is, or what sensual pleasure is, or what the pleasure higher than the sensual is. But those monks who are arahants, with chains destroyed, who have lived a holy life, done what had to be done, laid down the burden, reached the true goal, destroyed the fetters of being, and are completely liberated through final knowledge, it is they who would know what sensuality is, what sensual pleasure is, and what the pleasure higher than the sensual is. And this was said, the wanderer Vekhanassa was angry and displeased, and he reviled, disparaged, and censured the Blessed One, saying, "The recluse Gotama will be worsted." He then said to the Blessed One, "So then there are some recluses and Brahmins here, who without knowing the past and without seeing the future, yet claim, birth is destroyed, the holy life has been lived, what had to be done has been done, there is no more coming to any state of being." What they say turns out to be ridiculous. It turns out to be mere words, empty and hollow. Stop here for a moment. So here, when the Buddha said that you, because you follow a different teacher, you don't know what sensual pleasure is, or the pleasure higher than the sensual is. So he got very angry. But actually, sensual pleasure, I guess he should know, but the pleasure higher than the sensual, he would not know. So he felt he was put down, so he got very angry. If any recluses and Brahmins, without knowing the past and without seeing the future, yet claim, birth is destroyed, the holy life has been lived, what had to be done has been done, there is no more coming to any state of being, they can be confuted in accordance with the Dhamma. Rather, let the past be Kachana, and let the future be. Let a wise man come, who is honest and sincere, a man of rectitude. I instruct him, I teach him the Dhamma in such a way that by practicing as instructed, he will soon know and see for himself. Thus indeed, there rightly comes to be liberation from the bond, that is, from the bond of ignorance. Suppose, Kachana, there were a young tender infant lying prone, bound by stout bonds at the four limbs, with the fifth at the neck. And later on, as a result of his growth and the maturing of his faculties, those bonds loosened. Then he would know, I am free, and there would be no more bondage. So too, let a wise man come, etc. I will teach him the Dhamma. Thus indeed, there rightly comes to be liberation from the bond, that is, from the bond of ignorance. When this was said, the wanderer Vekhanassa said to the Blessed One, Magnificent Master Gotama, Magnificent Master Gotama. Master Gotama has made the Dhamma clear in many ways, etc. I go to Master Gotama for refuge, and to the Dhamma, and to the Sangha of monks. From today, let the Blessed One remember me as a lay follower who has gone to him for refuge for life. That's the end of the sutta. So you see, when the Buddha, this last part, told him that if really a person doesn't know the past and cannot see the future, yet he claims that the holy life has been lived, that he is not going to be reborn anymore, then he can be confuted in accordance with the Dhamma. That means not likely that this person, without knowing the past and seeing the future, can be liberated. The Buddha said, if a honest and sincere man, a man of rectitude, comes to me, a wise man, I can teach him, and he can attain liberation. And this wanderer probably has a high regard for the Buddha, and then he believed the Buddha and he took refuge. There's not so much Dhamma here. Let's go to the next sutta, which is quite good. Oh.